What is up, my fellow gamers out there? Well, after nearly 30 years of its initial release in 1997, I finally played Final Fantasy VII. And it's a bit silly situation because I love RPGs, I love good RPGs, and everyone knows that Final Fantasy VII is good. And why not played it for that long? I don't know, because probably, despite it was sitting on my backlog list for a very long time, I thought that, alright, this is a good game, so it don't have to be played. Because I know it's good, but it's silly. Silly, it's like a stupid thought because it's good. I had to experience why it's good. And now lately when I was checking out my backlog, what I should play next, I was like, alright, let's play an RPG again. And I was like, okay, now it's time, Final Fantasy VII. Let's boot it up and see if it's really like lives up to the hype. And I had to say yes, it does, especially if you compare it to the previous Final Fantasy games, which were already good, but the difference between and the jump from Final Fantasy VI to Final Fantasy VII, like technically, visually, and basically just the whole experience is a massive leap. And now I can see why this game was a massive success in 1997 and why it made PlayStation even stronger. Like, because the difference is day and night, and it really shows how much money has been spent. I'm going to tell you in the video how much money has been spent on this development, and it's absolutely crazy. When I done my research, I was like, what? So yes, Final Fantasy was definitely strong and very positive experience for me, and I made a lot of research on it, and I checked how it has been received, but everybody knows that it lives in the heart of all of the RPG lovers. So today we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII, and I don't want to talk about a lot in the intro, so let's jump in and let's start the video. Some games became classics and some games define a genre. And we have Final Fantasy VII, a game that changed the entire RPG industry forever. I always knew Final Fantasy VII was considered one of the greatest RPGs ever made, but somehow it stayed in my backlog for decades, because I know it is good, so it can wait. But in a way this is stupid, as I love playing good games and good RPGs, so why the wait? I don't know. Anyway, recently I finally sat down to answer one simple question. Was this legendary RPG really worth all the praise? And after finishing it, I completely understand why people still talk about it nearly 30 years later. When Final Fantasy VII launched in Japan in 1997, followed shortly by North America and Europe, it wasn't simply another sequel. It was Square's biggest gamble. Because previous Final Fantasy games had always appeared on Nintendo consoles, but this time Square made a big decision. They left Nintendo behind and developed the game exclusively for Sony's brand new PlayStation console. This decision shocked the gaming industry, but the reason was very simple: the CD-ROM technology. Because instead of being limited by cartridges, the PlayStation allowed developers to store hundreds of megabytes of data. That meant fully orchestrated quality music, massive words, lengthy dialogue, pre-rendered backgrounds, and perhaps, most importantly, full motion video cutscenes. Final Fantasy VII eventually shipped on 3 CDs, something that felt almost unbelievable back in 1997. And can you guess how much money has been spent on the development? When I made my research for this video and found out that the budget was approximately $80 to $85 million back in 1997, I was like, damn! With inflation adjusted, that would be around $160 or $170 million today. Wow! The development reportedly involved well over 100 people, and it became one of the most expensive games ever made. Fortunately for Square, the risk paid off spectacularly. Critics praised nearly every aspect of the game, while players couldn't believe what they were seeing. And let's stop here for a second and think about what kind of RPGs players could play around 1997. Sure, there were many already released on PlayStation, but Final Fantasy VII was a jaw-dropping experience. The earlier Final Fantasy titles already have a massive fanbase for RPG lovers, but for many people outside Japan, Final Fantasy VII wasn't just their first Final Fantasy, it was their first Japanese RPG. The game sold millions of copies, helped establish the PlayStation as a dominant console of its generation, and introduced an entirely new audience to role-playing games. Even today, Final Fantasy VII regularly appears near the top of lists ranking the greatest video games ever created. Now before we continue, I know some of you are probably wondering one thing: why didn't you just play the remake? And I did. I played the first part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake on the PlayStation 4, and from a technical perspective, it's an incredible achievement. The graphics are really stunning. When I fought the first boss, it was a fantastic visual experience, and the voice acting was also very good. And seeing Midgar recreated with modern technology is genuinely breathtaking. But after a few hours, I realized something. I wasn't experiencing the original Final Fantasy VII anymore. I was experiencing a modern reimagining of it. And that's not a criticism. In fact, I know many people absolutely love the remake. And since I haven't finished it, I don't think it would be fair for me to judge it as a whole. But for my first complete journey through Final Fantasy VII, I wanted to experience the game that changed the RPG genre back in 1997. Maybe that's because I'm a retro gamer. One of the reasons I love this hobby is that it lets me travel back in time. I enjoy seeing games as they originally were, understanding why they were revolutionary, and experiencing them in the same way millions of players did when they first had been released. For me, that's part of the magic. Now that doesn't mean I always avoid newer versions. Actually, I'm a big fan of remasters when they stay faithful to the original while improving the overall experience. If a remaster adds quality of life features, improves the interface, fixes balancing issues, reduces excessive grinding, or gives players optional improvements like adjustable encounter rates, then I'm often happy to recommend that version instead. To me, that's preserving a classic while making it more enjoyable to play today. But Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't trying to be a remaster. It's a completely new interpretation of one of gaming's most influential RPGs. And because of that, I wanted my first complete playthrough to be with the original release. I wanted to experience the game that made history before experiencing its modern retelling. Maybe one day I'll go back and play the remake from beginning to end. In fact, I think I probably appreciate it even more now that I finally understand where it all began. Alright, let's talk about one of the most important aspects of this game, the story. Don't worry, it will be spoiler free. First of all, one thing I absolutely loved was how quickly the game gets moving. There are no 30-minute introductions, no endless conversations explaining the world. However, sometimes I love a slow world building in an RPG, but here you jump straight into the action. Within minutes of grabbing the PS1 controller, you're already jumping off a train and blowing up a reactor, fighting soldiers and escaping again on a train while you not really have a clue what is happening. This opening immediately grabs your attention. At first, the story seems quite grounded. You play as a Cloud Strife, a former elite soldier turned mercenary who joins the eco-terrorist group Avalanche. Their mission is to stop the Shinra Electric Power Company, a corporation that is literally draining the planet's life energy, known as Mako, for profit. And I had to say that's a premise that's still relevant today. The corporate greed, environmental destruction, people sacrificing the future for short-term gains. But here's what I really appreciated. It isn't the whole story. As the adventure unfolds, the plot gradually transforms into something much darker, more emotional, and far more mysterious than I expected. I thought that the main goal would be to take down this evil company, save the world and the planet, and live happily ever after. But without spoiling anything, in every few hours the game reveals another layer that completely changes how you see the world and the story. With each passing hour, the story gets darker and darker, and my initial idea to take down the evil company was just a tiny ant compared to the elephant, what was really the main goal of the game. I had to say that I enjoyed the story, and while it was the usual save the world story like in every RPG, here it was a really good story which definitely worth experiencing. Despite its age, Final Fantasy VII remains surprisingly good. Exploration is mostly straightforward, with towns, dungeons and growing world map to discover. One feature I genuinely appreciated was the little red arrows that appear near an exit. It might sound insignificant, but with beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds it's sometimes difficult to see exactly where you can leave an area or if you can enter a house or a shop or it's just decoration. These indicators save a surprising amount of frustration and I really appreciate this. That kind of quality of life feature was incredibly thoughtful for 1997. The game also includes a very detailed in-game tutorial system. Whether you are learning battle formations, limit breaks, equipment or materia, almost everything is explained clearly and it's very useful, if you don't have the manual with you. Considering how deep the mechanisms become later on, having those tutorials available is a huge advantage for newcomers, but even for RPG veterans. That said, there are still a handful of moments where the game suddenly becomes quite cryptic. Occasionally, you need to find a very specific item or revisit a location with very little guidance. Most of the adventure flows naturally, but every now and then I completely understood why so many players kept a strategy guide beside them back in the late 90s. But it's not a Final Fantasy specific thing. Basically at a point you needed a guide for almost every RPG back then. It is the reason why many gaming magazines provided guides in those times. The heart of Final Fantasy VII's gameplay is its brilliant Materia system. Instead of assigning permanent jobs or classes to characters, your abilities come almost entirely from magical orbs called Materia. You simply slot them into your weapons and armor. Each Materia grants new abilities. Some allows you to cast powerful magic spells like Fire, Ice or Cure. Others improve your statistics. Some summon gigantic creatures to devastate enemies, and others unlock useful commands like Steal, Sense or Enemy Skill. What makes this system so clever is its flexibility. Cloud can become your healer, Barret can become your mage, and Tifa can focus entirely on support magic. Or you can completely change everyone's role simply by swapping Materia between characters. Later in the game, linked Materia combinations become incredibly satisfying to experiment with. For example, pairing all Materia, there's a Materia called All, with a healing spell allows you to heal your entire party at once. Small discoveries like that constantly reward experimentation. Even after all these years, the Materia system remains one of the smartest progression systems ever created in RPG. It is easy to learn, leaves a lot of room to customization and experiments. I enjoyed messing around with it. But of course, none of those Materia abilities would matter if the battles themselves weren't fun. And fortunately, Final Fantasy VII sticks to one of the most satisfying combat systems of its era. Battles are turn-based, but instead of characters taking turns in a fixed order, the game uses the active time battle or ATB system. Every character has a gauge that gradually fills during combat. Once it's full, that character is free to act. You can attack normally, cast magic, use an item, summon a powerful creature, or activate a special ability. Meanwhile, enemies aren't politely waiting for you to finish thinking. Their ATB gauges are filling as well, meaning battles always have a nice sense of urgency. It's a perfect middle ground between traditional turn-based combat and real-time action. Fast enough to stay exciting, but slow enough to let you think about your strategy. One of my favorite game mechanisms is the limit break system. Whenever a character takes damage during battle, a special gauge slowly fills. Once it's completely charged, that character can unleash an incredibly powerful signature attack called a limit break. Cloud performs devastating sword techniques, Barret unloads massive barrages with his gun arm, Tifa chains together powerful martial art combos. Every party member has their own unique limit breaks that perfectly match their personality and fighting style. Even better, they don't stay the same throughout the game. Characters can unlock new levels of limit breaks as they continue fighting and using them. Some are learned simply by using the previous limit break enough times, while others require defeating a certain number of enemies. This creates another satisfying layer of progression beyond simply gaining experience levels. There's always something new waiting to unlock. And when that limit goals finally flashes, it's incredibly satisfying to unleash a powerful attack that can completely turn the tide of the battle. Another feature I really appreciated is how flexible that party management is. Although Cloud is almost always with you, the rest of your team changes as new characters join the adventure. Outside of story moments, you're usually free to choose which companions travel with you. This means you can build a party that suits your own playstyle. Maybe you prefer heavy physical attackers, or you want to rely more on magic. Or perhaps you simply want to bring your favorite characters along. Because Materia determines so many of your abilities, almost anyone can fill almost any role, making experimentation rewarding. A small mechanic that's easy to overlook is the row system. Every character can be placed either in the front row or the back row. Characters standing in the front deal full physical damage but are also more vulnerable to enemy attacks. Move them to the back row and they receive less physical damage, but their own melee attacks become weaker as well. It's a simple risk versus reward mechanic that encourages you to think about party positioning. Keeping long-range fighters or fragile magic users in the back while placing tougher melee characters in the front often makes difficult battles much more manageable. It is the deepest tactical system ever created, but it's cool and gives you room to change your strategy and how you position your characters. Looking back nearly 30 years later, I'm actually surprised by how well these combat mechanics have aged. The ATB system keeps battles engaging, Materia gives you almost endless customization, limit breaks makes every character feel unique, and party management allows you to set up the experience to your own preferences. It's a combat system that's easy to learn, difficult to master, and one that still feels remarkably satisfying all these years later. It is impossible to talk about Final Fantasy VII without mentioning its presentation. Back in 1997, those pre-rendered environments looked absolutely breathtaking, and believe me, I was there when these things has been introduced in games. Each town, house and dungeon felt rich with detail that simply wasn't possible on cartridge-based systems. It was a massive graphical leap compared to previous generations. And of course, there were the full motion video cutscenes. Watching characters transition seamlessly from gameplay into cinematic sequences felt almost magical. Today, the character models may look charmingly blocky, but the artistic direction still shines through, and the atmosphere remains unforgettable. And there's the soundtrack. Composed by Nobuo Uematsu, it perfectly captures every emotion the story wants to convey. Whether it's quiet exploration, dramatic battles, or emotional moments, the music consistently matches the entire experience. It's no surprise that so many of these tracks are still performed by orchestras around the world today. If something this tells a lot high quality and memorable the soundtrack is. After finishing Final Fantasy VII, I completely understand why it's considered one of the gaming's defining masterpieces and why it's still a fantastic RPG. Because it screams high quality in every aspect. The story pulls you in immediately, but as I said, of course this is a hit or miss, as you might enjoy a slower world building, as most of the time I do as well, but here it worked me for just fine. There's the cool Materia system, the world feels alive, the soundtrack is unforgettable, and despite being nearly 30 years old, it's still enjoyable to play today. Yes, there are occasional moments where you probably wonder where the hell am I supposed to go now, but as I said, this is not a Final Fantasy VII specific. And yes, some mechanics definitely show their age, but those are tiny complaints compared to everything the game gets right. Final Fantasy VII isn't remembered simply because of nostalgia, it's remembered because it genuinely changed expectations of what a role-playing game could be. It proved that video games could tell emotional stories, create unforgettable worlds, and leave players thinking about them long after the credits rolled. If you somehow never experienced Final Fantasy VII, just like I hadn't until recently, I can honestly say it's a journey that's absolutely worth taking. Because sometimes there's a very good reason why a game becomes a legend, and Final Fantasy VII is one of those games. So, should you play Final Fantasy VII? Definitely. I think I not even really have to answer this question, because if you are a fan of RPGs and especially old school RPGs, this is definitely a very good and very strong, I call it strong like a really solid game. But I think it's not going to be surprise anyone, because even if I wanted to really find any kind of flaws in the game, I couldn't, because everything is just there, and it's very, as I said, very solid and very good experience. The only thing is what some people would, I would say, that not enjoy is the story. This kind of this techno, this is not cyberpunk, but this futuristic steam kind of thing is basically not for everyone. For guys who enjoy the old school stuff, you know, this like middle-aged stuff which is typical in RPGs, they probably not going to enjoy this kind of not post-apocalyptic but these grimy environments. But it's still definitely worth experiencing. Even myself, I'm not a fan of those environments, but I enjoyed the game and the story. And yes, definitely. And I talked about in the video already about the remake versus the original, and I think they are both a different world, a different experience. And I'm playing retro mostly, so I wanted to experience the original, like how it was like the real experience, because the remake is fantastic. It's visually and technically it's fantastic. Despite I only played the first part of first chapter. I don't know how many games, I think 2 or 3 Final Fantasy VII Remake has been released, but I played only the first one on PS4. I enjoyed it, but I wanted to experience the original one, and it was definitely a good experience. So I hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you would like to see another Final Fantasy remake, review, what's wrong with me? check out my Final Fantasy VI review, because Final Fantasy VI is an interesting video because everybody says that it's really good and masterpiece, and when I played I was like, yeah, check out. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and I'm going to see you in the next Backlog Quest video. Bye bye!